Max, what do you want for dinner?
Justice.
Batman Arkham City is a very special game. I play it once a year around Christmas time since it has this fitting winter vibe and it never gets old. I already know the story, the map, and completed all the side missions and collectibles a dozen times. And yet, it never ceases to amaze me. Whenever I start a new playthrough or just an old save game, I still feel like I haven't fully explored Arkham City and that there are still a lot of undiscovered secrets hidden in the dark streets filled with criminals and gangsters. And this is exactly what keeps happening all the time. Despite the map being pretty small, it never feels that way. The developers managed to make the entire city feel a lot bigger than it actually is, and I keep finding new details and Easter eggs every time I play. Arkham City is filled with massive attention to detail and references to comics, movies, and TV shows from the DC universe. One of the biggest reasons to play Arkham City is the unique atmosphere and aesthetic. I really think that that's where a lot of its charm comes from and makes it stand out, compared to other comic book adaptations. If the art direction of Arkham City wasn't as distinctive as it is, I highly doubt the game would have been anywhere near as successful as it was, no matter how good the story or gameplay elements are. Arkham City is an amazing mix between modern and vintage Art Deco architecture, held together by a strong noir-type storytelling atmosphere. Batman here is on par with old-school detectives and black and white movies, fighting mobsters, femme fatales, and narrating the whole thing in his head. Fittingly, the game takes place at night and in winter, with light snow falling and partially covering the surface. Choosing winter as a setting was a great choice, and not a lot of games have such a setting, and there is something very comfortable about winter nights. Have you ever looked at the sky when it's snowing? It's different. It has this light grayish look even at night. The developers managed to capture this in Arkham City, and it makes the game a lot more unique. Arkham City is the main attraction of this game. As I said before, I highly doubt that this game would have been nearly as successful if Arkham City wasn't the main location and didn't look the way it does. Because, sure, the previous game, Arkham Asylum, was a success, and that took place inside of an asylum that had limited space and cool gothic art direction, but it was still very limited. The asylum mostly looked like a modern asylum. However, Arkham City's art direction is timeless. Despite having a very strong vintage Art Deco vibe and aesthetic, it could also easily take place in the modern day, or the 80s, or the 70s. We don't really know when it takes place, which is faithful to the comics and part of the beauty of Arkham City and the Batman franchise in general. This opens so many possibilities in terms of storytelling, visual storytelling, and gameplay elements. To me, Arkham City is comparable to Rapture from BioShock. Sure, BioShock has an incredible story, fantastic gameplay, and beautiful visuals, but what makes these visuals so special are not the graphics but the setting. Rapture is a work of art and beauty, and one of the most breathtaking gaming locations ever made. Whenever I replay BioShock, I do it for the visuals and the city rather than the story. As amazing as it is, because the level and attention to details dedicated to it by the developers is simply mind-blowing. And I feel the same about Arkham City. Despite the game expecting you to be doing a lot of rooftop parkouring and gliding, they did not ignore the lower levels of the city. No matter whether you're in the air or down in the dark, shady neon-lit streets, it always looks fantastic. Another aspect is how cinematic the game feels. No matter where you are, just stopping and taking a look at your surroundings, especially if done from a rooftop overlooking the city, feels almost like a scene from a movie or a comic book. I know how hard to achieve this look can be, so the fact that it works so well here means the developers deserve even more praise. That's why, in my opinion, Arkham City is more than just a Batman game. It's an inspiring work of art the same way BioShock is. Arkham City has a lot of gameplay mechanics that all come together perfectly to form a solid basis. One of the things you'll be doing the most is gliding from one rooftop to the other or down into the streets. You can also use this mechanic to attack enemies in various ways. In Arkham City, it might appear as if Batman is being hunted by everyone, but in truth, you're the hunter. Through your earpiece, you can listen to what the criminals of the different factions think about Batman, and it's clear that most of them are terrified of him. None of them know who he really is, and they all think he's some kind of demon from hell. Attacking enemies directly or surprising them out of nowhere can cause panic and screams of terror. Considering that Batman has to face characters such as Solomon Grundy, Two-Face, or the Joker, all of whom are much more violent and deadly, we tend to forget that many of the citizens consider Batman to be just as terrifying and mysterious. And it's not just the criminals but normal citizens. There will be multiple moments where you will come across political prisoners in Arkham City, and when first confronted with Batman, they will be afraid and back away into a corner. The game offers you many ways to terrorize the criminal inmates of Arkham, silently picking them one by one as you lurk in the shadows and jump from one gargoyle to the other, or directly brutalize them, breaking all of their bones and throwing them from high-rise buildings. Batman never kills, of course, because he's far more sadistic than that. He enjoys breaking bones and paralyzing his victims, which is without a doubt one of the reasons why they all fear him so much. That's why you have dozens of amazing gadgets at your disposal, from bat boomerangs that knock someone out to electric guns that electrocute enemies without killing them, but also open doors and gates when needed. Of course, let's not forget the classic smoke bomb that fills the air with smoke and gives you the chance to choke out enemies or beat them up while they are inhaling the smoke, shaking in their boots. For the Arkham games, Rocksteady developed a special type of combat system that is very free-flowing and rewards good timing. Usually during a fight there will be indicators telling or hinting at when to block a strike and when to hit back or perform a combo. This might sound very basic now, 14 years later, but back when the game came out, this was a fresh system and praised by almost everyone. It had a massive impact on games such as Assassin's Creed, Spider-Man, but most noticeably on the Lord of the Rings Shadow of Mordor and War franchise. In fact, playing Shadow of War or Mordor feels almost like playing a copy of a game out of the Batman Arkham franchise, except with swords and bows. Despite the fights mostly playing out the same, except for special boss encounters, it never feels boring or annoying, despite being repetitive. Repetition in games is often negative and rightfully criticized, however, I believe it's not always a bad thing. It all really depends on the game and how it handles the repetition. Arkham City does a fantastic job. There are so many different fighting combos and special moves that you can use and unlock that it makes you actually want to get into fights with enemies. The fighting feels very satisfying and rewarding. The combat is very fluid and fast. It feels like a dance where you quickly move from one target to the other, which is interesting because originally this free flow system was supposed to be rhythm based. You had to punch and block based on certain sounds, and this original idea can still be felt when playing. There are a lot of nuances to this system. It might appear simple, but you can quickly get overwhelmed. Different types of enemies will require different types of tactics and combos. However, that doesn't mean that the game can't be challenging even on lower difficulties, but especially on higher ones. The inmates of Arkham City might be afraid of Batman, but they will still fight him or try to kill him first chance they get. Sometimes they start running away after you take down some of their comrades, but most of the time they do put up a fight. As the story progresses, the enemy types get more diverse and you will have to plan your attacks carefully. You can die quickly, and I made the mistake of underestimating some situations just because I got a bit too much into role-playing Batman and thinking that I'm actually a half-human demon bat from hell. Batman is a detective after all, not just a brute martial artist superhero. In many instances you will have to investigate crime scenes or the area in general to gather clues or information on your target or the situation. And this is one of the coolest features because it's not only tied to the story, gameplay and lore, but there are some genuinely amazing side missions that have you utilize this investigation feature. I don't want to spoil any story or side quest details, but I can say that the side missions here are handcrafted and don't feel like a chore at all. These are not the Ubisoft type missions where you have to collect a few thousand useless flowers for some achievement that offers no benefit at all. Which is not to say that there are no collectibles. They are here, but even they are tied to some of Batman's famous villains, such as the Riddler, and make sense within the lore of the game. Arkham City has a certain horror vibe that seems to be everywhere. The statues around the city look creepy, the buildings and streets are shady, propaganda flyers and posters have horrible messages, and the entire place is filled with evil. So fittingly, this can also be felt in the side activities, especially in some of the side missions that have you track serial killings or some even worse crimes. There are side missions that, despite being short, have really well made storylines and cinematic, not to mention some plot twists that you genuinely don't see coming. It's refreshing to play a game with such well-made side missions and side content, as this is an area that is usually disappointing in most games. Arkham City can feel big and small at the same time, despite being full of details and secrets, and despite you being able to freely explore, it does have a claustrophobic atmosphere. The city is walled, you can't leave since you'd be killed by the guards and rockets on the walls and watchtowers. Despite being Batman, you're just as much a prisoner of Arkham City as all the criminals and villains within it, and that's how you are being treated. No matter where you go, almost everyone tries to kill or capture you. Around the whole city, there are hundreds of cameras watching the streets. You can take them down if you want to, but there are so many of them that you might feel like it's a waste of time, which adds to the claustrophobia because you are being watched all the time and there is seemingly no escape. Like the walls have eyes, and it's not just the cameras watching you, as you will find out eventually. All throughout the city, you can hear Hugo Strange making very weird and totalitarian announcements that are echoed everywhere. This gives off very strong 1985 Big Brother vibes, which is exactly what Rocksteady wanted. They wanted you to feel helpless to a certain degree and like there's no peaceful corner. Sure, you are Batman, sure, most of the inmates are afraid of you, but you are also trapped with them. You are just as much an inmate as they are, and the game does not give you the option to ever leave. It forces you to stay in Arkham City. As the player, you will have to learn your way around. You will have to learn the different districts and who controls them. In many ways, it feels like the concept of this game was heavily inspired by John Carpenter's Escape from New York. It's a very similar concept and both deal with the time-sensitive scenario. I understand that calling Arkham City the best Batman game ever made might appear very clickbaity. I personally love and adore Arkham Origins and Knight. I think those sequels are amazing and just as beautiful as City. However, the difference in my opinion is that Arkham City was the first Batman to introduce an open world filled with such visuals, aesthetic, and gameplay systems. Origins and Knight are both great games. I love them, and both of them introduce new features and look just as gorgeous. They perfectly built upon a foundation that Arkham City laid. But that's the thing, they built upon the foundation. They likely wouldn't have existed if City flopped or didn't look and play the way it does. The same can be said about a lot of other games such as the Lord of the Rings games I mentioned or the Marvel Spider-Man franchise, which is clearly heavily inspired by the Arkham series and especially Arkham City. The Arkham franchise has been lucky in the sense that the games that followed have all been very good, although not without issues. Arkham Origins does nothing new or exceptional, however it does utilize the tools given by City and expands them. It has a great story and feels much darker in tone despite being a prequel. It's the awkward middle child of the franchise because it was developed by Warner Bros. Studios while Rocksteady was busy working on Arkham Knight and got a lot of hate upon release, despite very successful sales numbers. However, in recent years it seems like it has been rediscovered by people and a lot of gamers actually view it as one of the best games within the franchise. There's now countless YouTube videos discussing it and why it's underrated. And then there's Arkham Knight. In my opinion, actually the second best game within the Arkham series. It actually does a lot of things better than City and offers a huge amount of options to seriously roleplay Batman and feel like you're the Dark Knight. Its visuals are even better and the atmosphere of Gotham is fantastic. The only reason I'm not saying that Arkham Knight is the best Arkham game is because the story, while not bad, is nowhere near as good as that of City or even Origins, and Scarecrow does not seem to be be as dangerous a villain as the Joker was. Which is not to say that Scarecrow is not creepy or a bad villain. I still have flashbacks from his creepy missions in Arkham Asylum. But with Joker, you never knew what he would do next or what he had in store for you. Scarecrow just doesn't have the same charisma or presence. Arkham City is a very nostalgic game for me, and when I was writing this review, I wondered whether this nostalgia is blinding me and just giving me a rose-colored view of it. However, when I was replaying it for this video, I never felt like the game was outdated or lacking. It actually felt very refreshing because Arkham City doesn't waste your time. It doesn't send you on boring fetch quests or forces you to get useless collectibles. It cuts straight to the point, you always know exactly what you have to do, but it also doesn't hold your hand and gives you a lot of freedom. For a 14-year-old game, it not only looks very good but also plays great. It has more gameplay elements and mechanics than a lot of current next-gen games, which is crazy to me. I think Arkham City is a timeless game that will still look and play great 20 years from now, just because of how well crafted it is. The developers clearly put their heart and soul into it, and I'm grateful for it.